I want to go ahead and say welcome to everyone who's already logged in. My name's Bailey Gordon. I'm the Interim Executive Director for OK Ethics. And if this is your first time attending one of our programs, I want to extend a special welcome to you. And I also want to say thank you and welcome to all of our members. We are so glad to have had you with us virtually this year, and we are really looking forward to getting back to our in-person programs soon. But just a little bit about OK Ethics. We support and promote ethical standards in business by providing networking, resources, and education for people who seek to live and work with integrity. So we have an incredible example of that today with Robert Curbeam here as our speaker, and I know we are all looking forward to hearing from him. In May, we have Richard Kite set to speak about ethical decision-making under pressure. He is an author, endowed professor, and the director of the D.B. Reinhardt Institute for Ethics and Leadership at Viterbo University in Wisconsin. So he's listening in with us today, and we hope that you will join us again next month. Again, we are offering CPE credit today, and if you will go to the chat, I will go ahead and put that link in for you to request that, or please, as many of you are doing, say hello and put your first and last name in the request for your CPE there. As a reminder, you need to be logged in for the duration of our program to get that, which I'm sure this is going to be thrilling, so you won't want to log off early. Please just participate in the chat, because that's one of the best ways that we can verify that you were here. But just later, as we have been doing, we will be taking questions for our speakers. So as you have them, please throw those into the chat or use our Q&A feature, and we will be doing that here at the very end. So I want to go ahead and introduce our first speaker for today. Rocky Goins is here to present our guiding principle. So for those of you who are new to OK Ethics, the guiding principle for the day, our guiding principles really reflect the core values of our organization and help guide our decisions so that we're working and living with integrity. So I want to introduce to you again, Rocky Goins. He is the founder and president of Leading Light Development and Construction Consulting. So after graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy, Rocky served as a contracting officer for Dev Group, which is now known as SEAL Team 6, the Naval Air Station Oceana and Dam Neck Facility, and later in the Seabees, working on multiple international projects. And after leaving the Navy, Rocky developed and renovated more than $1 billion of commercial, retail, mixed use, and senior living projects across the country. And currently as owner of Leading Light Development and Construction Consulting, Rocky owns, develops, and renovates assisted and memory care communities nationally. Rocky has an MBA from the Johns Hopkins University in organizational behavior, and he actually helped us to get his friend and our speaker here with us today. So Rocky, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Bailey, for such a great introduction. Today, I'd like to talk about a guiding principle that called Inspired Trust. In today's society, trust is not freely given. People have a lot of doubt and about people and about what they hear. We earn trust by our ability to speak and act with integrity, wisdom, and fairness. At the U.S. Naval Academy, we are constantly reminded that leadership must have honor and integrity woven into it when we're taking our teams through difficult assignments and achieving difficult tasks and goals. The same has to go with your business. Do your customers, your clients, your team associates trust in your product, trust in your service, trust in your leadership? Just a couple of weeks ago, my company concluded a construction project, getting a certificate of occupancy for a senior living community up in the Chicago region. The city we were working for gives what's called partial certificate of occupancies, and they don't give a full certificate of occupancy until every item on your list is done. Some of the things on the list were time sensitive that we could not get done, like certain landscaping, until it gets warmer. And our insurance company said, we cannot insure you until you get a full certificate of occupancy. So I met with the city leaders and said, I have an issue. I know this is the way you conduct business, but I need to have a full certificate of occupancy And I need to find a way that you guys are assured that we will finish the punch list that you guys have set. I toured the city manager through the building, and at the end he said, "Rocky, we're going to meet this afternoon, but we'll give you what you want." He said, "My entire inspection staff said that this has been a unique experience of working with you and your development team. You guys have been transparent throughout the entire process. You guys showed us what issues we were having on the project and the problems we're having during this pandemic. And everything we presented to you, you guys rolled up your sleeves with us to come up with solutions. We trust you, and we will give you a full certificate of occupancy because we know that you will fulfill all the promises to get things done. This is the first time we've ever done this." I was touched. And you can see by the expression of my face that inspiring the trust in the city staff, where they believe in my word and in our words and getting the things done, is important to me. And they recognize that. And I just think that we all, as business owners, business leaders, need to continue to strive for that with the people that we work with and work for and serve in everything that we do. Today, there's no person better that I can introduce that inspires trust than Robert Curbeam. Robert Curbeam, when he graduated from the academy, he was a Tomcat, F-14, RIO, radio interceptor officer. He went to Top Gun. He won awards at Top Gun. He is just so well held esteemed that he got into the astronaut program. And he's known for having the most spacewalks on a single mission than any other astronaut. We call him Beamer, and because at the Annapolis, even during the hard times and ages, we call it dark ages, when things are just really rough, Beamer always kept smiling in all ways and inspiring us all. And he just couldn't remove the smile off his face. So we nicknamed him Beamer, and we saw that carry forward when he was in F-14 Tomcat. And then when he was up in space, it's now well known that's his nickname. But Robert when he launched off into space, we felt like his classmates went with him because he holds the values that we hold in endearment. He's just such a strong representation of what the best things the Academy is all about and what our nation is all about. So I am delighted and honored to introduce my friend and classmate, Beamer Curbeam, for this OK Ethics session. Beamer.
Well, thank you very, very much, Rocky. You know, it's always cool to listen to introductions like that, and you know, and the reason I say that is because, as I tell people all the time, there's sometimes when people introduce me and I go, "Gosh, I want to meet that guy," you know. But thank you, Rocky. I really appreciate it. That means a lot coming from you, and I appreciate you being so kind as to introduce me today. So today, what I'd like to do is I'd like to just share with you guys a little bit about my life and background, and why I think what you're doing, talking about ethics and how important it is important to me and has been important throughout my career. And I always try to start presentations when I give them by showing Baltimore. And this is my beloved Baltimore. It did not look this way when I was growing up there, but it is an absolutely beautiful city and inspired me to do a lot of what I've accomplished. So I always try to, as my mother said, never forget where I came from. And so I'll talk a little bit about my past and talk about how ethics and ethical behavior and honorable behavior fit into my career and my life. And so I always start with this, and this tells you a little bit about my background. I am a Baltimore boy through and through. And as you can see, I was a big Orioles fan growing up. The Colts, for those of you who didn't know, were actually the Baltimore Colts when I was growing up, and I went to high school there. But if you look up there in the upper right-hand corner, it all started in a place called Turner Station. And that's where I grew up the first 6 years of my life. And back in Baltimore during segregation, that's where the Blacks that worked at the local factories and the steel mill lived, Turner Station. So that's where I grew up. Also grew up to absolutely love lacrosse, and those are my two favorite teams up there in the upper left-hand corner. Navy, where I played, and Hopkins, who I rooted for when I was growing up and I was younger. And also I was very, very fortunate in that I grew up with a chemistry teacher for my mom. And so she inspired a love of engineering and science, and especially of chemistry. And so that was something that I just grew up with and just loved all those things. And of course, growing up during the Apollo era, when we put people on the moon, I was very, very inspired by that and by my mother, and seeing her always going to school during the summer to work on her multiple master's degrees and her doctorate. So it was always really, really cool to see what she was accomplishing, and then hoping that I could at least come close to what she accomplished. I was fortunate enough on Christmas Eve of 1979 to get a call from my congressman telling me that I was his principal nominee to the United States Naval Academy. And so that was just the best Christmas gift anybody could ever get, I thought, because that meant that I was going to be able to go to college. And that was just an incredible, absolutely incredible call. I still remember it today. And so in going through all that, I didn't know that this was going to be my first introduction, really, to what I would say is honorable and ethical behavior. Because at the Naval Academy, they had something then called, and still have, the honor concept. And the honor concept, in short, states that a midshipman will not lie, cheat, or steal. But it is unique in that the entire system, the entire honor system, is run by midshipmen. So you get the sense while you're there that this is a debt you owe to your peers. And this is something you do not only because it's, in air quotes, the right thing to do, but it's the right thing to do for your peers, for your shipmates, and for your classmates. And when I was there, I saw that in action. And it actually helped me because I had a classmate who I was very, very close friends with. And we shared a major. And we would often talk to each other about what happened in class if one of us missed. And he actually missed a class once. And he went into my room while I was there, while I was not there, excuse me, which was fine. And he wanted to just look over my notes from that class. Well, one thing that was rare for me was to actually finish homework a little early. And I had finished the homework, and there was a no collaboration clause for that class as far as homework was concerned. And my homework was in my notebook, and he glanced at it, not necessarily intending to, but when he saw it, of course, my idea started to become his, and his homework looked an awful lot like my homework when we turned it in. And unfortunately for him, my homework was extremely wrong. So when we handed it in and the professor saw this, he saw this similarity and thought these guys definitely collaborated on this. Now, keep in mind, I had no idea he had gone and checked my notes, had no idea what had gone on. But when the professor asked both of us to come see him after class, without any hesitation, my classmate came up to me and he said, I think I know what he wants to see us about, and I don't think he needs to see you. So if you will please wait here until I go up and see him. And if he still wants to see him, I'll come down to the classroom and get you. So he went up there and explained what had happened to the professor, did not involve me at all. And I think it was because he felt like that was his responsibility to me, to keep me uninvolved. And that was my first glance at how the honor concept is supposed to work and how it works well at the Naval Academy, and led to what I think has been a career that has a career where I have experienced a lot of ethics choices, if you will, and it established a good foundation for me to look back on and to build off of in order to lead an ethical career and go forward. So that was my first experience. And then I went down to flight school and had the pleasure of flying the mighty Tomcat for about 10 years after that. And that was an absolutely amazing experience. Got to go to Top Gun and had the pleasure of meeting people who also shared those kinds of values and worked to instill those in me even further. So I was very, very fortunate to be in and around people who shared the same kinds of thoughts that I had about ethical behavior. And I would say, in a lot of cases, even exceeded them. You know, my first wingman was an amazing guy. And I still remember his words after I'd been in the squadron for about 3 or 4 months. And I'd had what would be termed a pretty bad flight. And the first thing that Admiral Zellabor, then he was Lieutenant Commander Zellabor, told me was, mediocrity will not be tolerated. And he meant that in every way and sense of the word, and in everything that we did, not only as a team, but that I should take that as my mantra. And I don't think ethics is any exception to that. As a matter of fact, I think you have to take that mantra and apply it to everything you do. And I know he did, and he helped me learn how to do that. And that helped me in one of the situations that I had when I was in that squadron, where I was assigned the task to do what was called a developmental missile shot, where we were testing the capability of a missile called a Sparrow missile, just like this one you see. And my job was to fire the missile within a certain set of parameters. And then afterwards, those parameters, how close I came to those parameters and the performance of the missile would be published in a newsletter to the entire F-14 community. And because the aircraft was a fleet aircraft and was not instrumented, so they couldn't draw the data from the aircraft telling when and how I shot the missile, it was all based on a report from myself and the pilot that they would make this report and do this write-up. And so, as you can imagine, there's a lot of pressure to get it right. But because of the background that I had, I also knew that whatever I reported back would be used by the rest of the fleet to determine how they would use this weapon in combat. And so it was incumbent upon me to not only get as close to those parameters they were looking for as possible, but if I did not, to admit how far off of those parameters I was, because I had a debt to the rest of the fighter community to make sure that they knew exactly how well or poorly this missile might perform if it were ever fired in anger by someone other than me. And so you see, or at least I saw during my entire time in the Navy, that this ethical behavior isn't just about doing things right and doing the right things, but it's also a debt that you pay to your peers and your fellow sailors, soldiers, airmen, and Marines. It's something that you do because they are counting on you to do it. And they will make decisions based on that behavior that you display. So it was really, really a valuable lesson that I learned during that time. And it carried pretty much throughout my career, even when I got out of the service and got into business. So I thought it was a really, really important lesson and a very valuable one that I learned. After doing my squadron tour, I was fortunate enough to go to the United States Naval Test Pilot School. And during that time, flew in 26 different types of aircraft, which was really, really cool. And during that time, probably the most important thing that I learned was how to discern between different and bad. Because one of the things that you find is that when you get very, very used to something, whatever that might be, in this case, flying a certain airplane, like the Tomcat in my case, you kind of start to get used to it and it becomes the norm. And you think that's the way. Sometimes you can think, okay, that's the way you should always do it. And that's how all airplanes should fly. That's how all airplanes should be configured. That's how all airplanes should be operated. And what they're trying to do in test pilot school is explain to you that there are many different ways, just like there are many different aircraft, there are many different ways to accomplish the same mission using an aircraft. And so you learn to discern different from bad. So when you get into a new airplane, you're like, oh, this is different from the Tomcat, but that does not necessarily make it bad. And I was fortunate enough to even fly some international airplanes, like the one you see in the lower left-hand corner. I went over to Italy and flew with the Italian Air Force for 2 weeks in their Tornadoes. And that airplane was vastly different from what I was used to flying. But once again, that didn't make it bad. And that's one of the great things about the experience at test pilot school. It teaches you that, helps you learn that. And that would also help me when I would go on after test pilot school to the Naval Air Warfare Center and do F-14 air-to-ground weapons separation. Because once again, I was put into a role where I would be able, I was tasked to release numerous different stores from the aircraft in a test environment, and then report back to the fleet about its success or failure. And to amplify how important this is, in one of those flights, when myself and my pilot, Chris Ferguson, came back, we released a weapon that failed, and we ended up having a 6-foot long gash that was about 3 inches wide on the inner nacelle of our F-14. And it was absolutely critical that we report that, even though we had a lot of pressure to get the testing done quickly, but we had to report that and make sure that it wasn't something that we did that caused that failure. It was incumbent upon us, once again, to do very honorable thing and explain exactly what we had done with that aircraft, how we had flown it before, during, and after the test, to make sure that everyone knew that they could then go out and release those weapons safely. So it was yet again that same lesson learned, that what you're doing, this ethical behavior that you display, is a debt that you're paying to your peers to keep them safe. And so it was a really, really good, once again, really, really good lesson to relearn in doing that kind of testing. And this is actually another picture of us releasing a weapon. And the reason I put this one in is because I think sometimes people don't realize the magnitude of the danger that you sometimes experience in doing this. And for that same, and then you look at this picture and you see how large the stores we are releasing are compared to the aircraft, and how much damage they could do if they re-impacted the aircraft during release. And so it's very, very important that you do your job ethically and report on exactly what you have found out in these tests, to make sure that none of your friends who are out there in the fleet releasing these weapons get hurt. It's very, very important. Very, very important. And then after 3 years at Pax River, I was fortunate enough to get selected into the astronaut corps. And that was just an absolutely incredible experience. And I show this picture just to show people just how different every day as an astronaut is. I mean, one day you're flying a T-38 from Houston out to El Paso, and the next day you're getting introduced by the President of the United States, and then 3 days later you're underwater for 6 hours practicing a spacewalk, and sometimes you're in the VR lab practicing a spacewalk. It is just a very different job every single day. And it was just an incredible experience, but once again, one where ethical behavior and trust, as Rocky put it, is valued and expected, because there are other people who are making decisions based upon that information that you give and based upon the behavior that you exhibit. They're making decisions that may affect someone else's life. And so it was very, very important that those same qualities of ethical and honorable behavior were displayed when I was in that job as well. And just to give you a quick summary of my astronaut career and how all this fits in is, I was selected as an astronaut back in 1995, did 3 space flights, 7 spacewalks, and I will tell you, it is an absolutely incredible experience. Incredible experience. Traveling at 17,500 miles per hour around this Earth, which is absolutely beautiful, as you can see in that picture on top. That's actually the aurora borealis, so the aurora around the North Pole. And seeing that and all the wonder that it brings to you visually was just an incredible experience. I just cannot even begin to explain how magnificent that experience was, and how grateful I am for having the opportunity to experience it. As I tell people all the time, Uncle Sam's given me far more than I could ever give back in 2 lifetimes. And I like to think that I in some way did right by this nation, and doing all those things. But I do know and feel very fortunate to have had that opportunity. Like I said, I was fortunate enough to do 7 spacewalks, and that was a pretty amazing experience as well. And you can see me on some of those spacewalks. But the one down on the lower left-hand side is probably the one I'm most proud of. And that was one where we had gone outside to do a 7-hour spacewalk to fix a solar array that would not retract. And that's me standing on the end of the robotic arm, actually helping to make that solar array retract. And during that entire time, as you can imagine, since it was a contingency, it wasn't designed to be closed the way I was closing it. And it certainly wasn't designed to have people out there touching it. It was very, very important, once again, to carefully document what I was doing, how I was doing it, and what was working, what wasn't. Because I knew if this happened again, they would use the same data for someone else. And I wanted to make sure I kept them safe in what they were doing and allowed them to do it effectively. And sure enough, two flights later, we did have another solar array malfunction, and they used the data collected on this spacewalk to teach that guy how to do it. So it was a pretty amazing experience. And last, talk about one of the saddest days of my life. And this, for those of you who don't recognize it, is unfortunately the debris of Space Shuttle Columbia, where I lost 7 of my friends on a horrible February day over Texas. And the reason I show this picture is because this is maybe one area where we failed to look into things as deeply as we could. But after the accident, I was fortunate enough to be assigned to the team that actually did the hazard analysis, the integrated hazard analysis of the entire space shuttle system to ensure that never happened again. And once again, I think that although that was very, very difficult, and there were people who wanted to fly sooner, there were people who wanted to get back into space as soon as possible, it was important to sit there and be very deliberate and think about all the different risks, however ugly they might be, and all the mistakes that we made that led up to this, to make sure that, like I said before, we paid that debt back to the people who were going to fly in the future, myself included, in space shuttles, because I flew once after this accident, and make sure that we displayed that same kind of ethical behavior throughout to make sure that we could go, when we did go back and return to flight, that we did it safely. And very, very happy to say that we had the full support of our organization in the way we did it. And, we completed quite a few flights after this accident very, very safely because of those things and because of that kind of support we got from the organization. And then last but not least, I wanted to share just one example of ethical behavior that I saw in industry, because I know most of the people on this call are dealing more with that. I just wanted to cover how it worked for me in industry. And it was just one really quick example while I was working for Ares Corporation, where we were asked by a prime contractor to actually, we were part of their team, and we were asked to, let's just say, stretch the truth a little bit in our accomplishments and our capabilities as a small business to help them win a contract. And and I'm very, very proud to say that when that occurred, I was working on that proposal, and my management at Aries backed me up and said, no, we will not do that. We will not do that. We will state our capabilities plainly, and we will state them within the bounds of what we've accomplished. And I was really, really proud of the company there, because it's always easy to stretch the truth a little bit and tell organizations that maybe you can do things that you really can't. But because the work we were doing was for the US space program, they realized that it's very, very important that we tell the truth, not only because, there might be lives on the line based on what kind of work we were going to do, but also because of what Rocky was talking about earlier. And that's because we had, as a corporation, earned the trust of our customer. And trust is hard to gain and can be lost very, very quickly. And our management at Aries Corporation realized that and decided, no, we would very clearly and honestly state our capabilities, and we did. And I'm sad to say we didn't win the contract, which is kind of unfortunate, but I still think that we did the right thing. And in the future, we won several other contracts with that same customer, so it wasn't like that one thing ruined the business. But I think it was important that we do the right thing, ethical thing, in order to keep the trust of that customer. And I'm sure that that contributed in the future to Aries winning many of the contracts that we did. So in summary, I just wanted to wrap it all by saying yes, ethics and ethical behavior is important because it's important to do the right thing and do things right. But it's also important because there are other people who are depending on you doing the right things. And sometimes there are lives involved, sometimes there are businesses involved. But I think that we don't often enough mention that part of it, that there are other people who are counting on you behaving ethically, and you owe it to them to do so. So with that, I'll wrap up, and I want to leave a lot of time for questions. And if you have a question, you can contact Bailey. She's going to moderate, and I'll be happy to answer any that you have.
Yes.
Beamer, if I may ask a couple of quick questions. I failed to mention in my introduction that you're now the Senior Vice President of Maxar Technologies. Would you do me a favor and just touch upon what you're doing with Maxar? And would you highlight what your leadership and the Challenger Foundation, how you're working with the families of that terrible disaster, please?
Yes, I will. I'm a senior vice president for space capture at Maxar, and so my job is to win new business for Maxar in the space arena. And we do work in 3 different parts of the market: the civil market, which is mostly NASA and NOAA, the national security space market, which is a bunch of customers we don't talk about, obviously, and then we do a lot of work in the commercial sector. And so building mostly communication satellites. And as far as the Challenger Center for Space Science Education, what we're trying to do there, well, first of all, I'll explain what it is. It is an organization founded by the surviving family members of the crew that died on Challenger back in the 80s. And what they do and what we do is we use space science mostly with middle school and high school children, some elementary, but we use it to get them interested in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and use it to encourage them to go into STEM fields, both academically and also professionally. And we have 43 different centers all around the world. And we also have a number of virtual missions that we send out to kids. But what we're trying to do is just encourage more and more of these kids to get into STEM careers. And I am the chairman of the board of that organization. It's a nonprofit, and we and I absolutely love it. I think there's nothing more exciting to me than sitting in one of those simulations where half of the students are playing mission control roles, half of the students are playing as astronauts, and they are learning exactly how much fun STEM can be. And it reminds me of me when I was young, and my mother would give me a new chemistry set, or she would, allow me to do another experiment and so forth. And I'm hoping and praying that some of you will just at least look into Challenger Center and see what kind of work we do and support us. So thank you very much. Thanks for asking, Rocky.
Great. We have a few questions that have come in. One of the first is, do you think that seeing the world from space changed your way of thinking about problems or stresses in your life?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. It puts a lot of things into perspective. And I'll mention two things. The first is, I always tell people, if you don't leave this earth as a conservationist, you'll come back as one. Because it definitely shows you the effect of humankind on the earth, and also it shows you how truly insignificant your personal issues or situations are in the big scheme of things. Because you look down on the earth and you see how huge it is, how many people are down there doing their thing every day. And you're like, and I'm just little old me. But even more mind-boggling is when you turn your lights off, you're on the dark side of the earth, and you look out, and for every star you might see on a clear night from Earth, you see 20 or 40 more when you look out into the universe. And then you really start to feel insignificant as far as the entire universe is concerned. And so I think that I don't know who wrote that question, but they are absolutely correct. It changes your perspective on life and where you fit in this huge universe that we have.
Definitely. We have a couple of questions, and that was from Lynn Flynn, by the way, so you know her. We have a couple of questions that have come in about who has influenced you and who has served as your role model. So Gerald Scott asked, who influenced you to pursue the career path in NASA that you chose? And Oscar Womack has asked, who has served as your role model, and said that when he was a young cadet in the late 60s, then Colonel Chappie James served as his throughout his Air Force career. So yeah, a couple of asking who your influences are.
Well, I think probably the biggest one is my mom. I mean, my mom, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. I mean, she was the 12th of 13 children, the only one of the 13 to go to a 4-year college. And she just never stopped learning. And that was an inspiration to me, just to see how much she accomplished in her lifetime, having 4 kids herself and teaching and going to school in summers and all. And that was very inspiring. But another thing that I do want to make sure that people hear is, I didn't really decide that I wanted to be an astronaut until I was 28 years old. I was at test pilot school. We took a field trip down to Johnson Space Center, and this absolutely amazing woman got out in front of our class, and she told us about her experiences as an astronaut and how cool it was going to be to go on her first spacewalk. And her name was Kathy Thornton. And then she was nice enough to come down to lunch with our class, and she sat across from me. And the more and more I listened to this woman, the more and more I decided, man, when I grow up, I want to be like her. And Kathy and I are still friends to this day. As a matter of fact, she just retired as a professor down at the University of Virginia. And every time I see her, or actually now I even see her kids every once in a while, they always tell that story about how she was amazed that she was the inspiration for me deciding to go the astronaut route. But does have the virtue of being true. But more importantly than that, I tell people all the time is I think it is very, very important to have numerous mentors. I think about my mother when I was growing up. I think about all my lacrosse coaches and wrestling coaches that inspired me when I was growing up, and how they inspired me to work hard and persevere. And then I think, I had my mentor, Dave Kennedy, who was a F-18 pilot when I was at test pilot school. Various mentors in the astronaut office. One, Mark Lee, who was an Air Force officer, to help me learn how to be a better spacewalker, and things like that. So I think the most important lesson to be learned is, yeah, you can have role models, and I really can't sit there and say, with the exception of Kathy Thornton, she was probably the only singular role model that I had. But by having numerous mentors with different perspectives, I think that led me down the path that I went down, by always presenting me with the right kinds of questions and asking me, why I was doing this and what my objectives were in doing things. So I'd say probably Kathy Thornton was probably one of my biggest role models, but had numerous mentors throughout my career, all of whom helped me, achieve in different ways. And there's no doubt in my mind that I wouldn't have been able to succeed without them. No doubt in my mind. No.
Well, I think that's a great segue to another question that we've gotten here. Did you ever feel like giving up? And if so, what kept you going?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, I think like maybe every morning I woke up at the United States Naval Academy. and the thing I think that kept me going, there were a number of things. Really, I pride at some on some level comes into it, right? But I think something that my company officer told us when we were there at the Naval Academy during plebe summer. He said, pick out somebody who is doing well and ask yourself every morning, he said, ask yourself, well, gosh, if that guy can make it, why can't I? And a lot of it was that. You just sit there and you find somebody, you think, gosh, I should be able to do better than that person. That person, now, granted, that person could change every day. It could be in different situations, but you just need some kind of motivation that is outside of you. Sometimes, yeah, there's the internal pride of wanting to do well, but I think sometimes it helps to have an external motivator as well, however artificial it might be. And in that case, it's very artificial and very random, but it did help me get through. And I thank Captain Eaton for telling us that, because that's exactly what he told us. that guy can make it. Gosh, I should be able to make it, you know? And sometimes that's all it took.
Absolutely.
Sometimes
Um, we've had a couple of questions about, you mentioned several times where management, having the support of management and making the ethical decision and, modeling that ethical behavior, how that affected, the way the NASA team recovered from the accident, or, the support of the Ares management team regarding your contract. How do you think that set the tone amongst employees, and also played a role in, how long you stayed with the company, or, kind of your views within the company?
I think it's absolutely critical. I don't think you can do it without it. I really, really don't think you can make it happen without management support. So I think it's absolutely critical. And it's something that, like I said, growing up in business, and in the service, I experienced several times. Um, and so that made me even more adamant about creating that kind of environment when I became a leader and when I became, that management, as you said, is to make sure that situation, that environment was pervasive. And quite frankly, when in one case where I didn't see that, I left the company
Yeah.
because I felt that strongly about it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that importance. Here's a really interesting question that we got from Jeremy Allen. Giving the current focus on the need for more racial equality in our country, have you given any presentations specifically on the concept of different isn't necessarily bad, as it may pertain to different racial groups and the way we all see each other and respect each other?
I haven't. That's an interesting perspective, but I can see where it would be totally applicable. And like I said, it's a lesson that they beat it into you at test pilot school, you know, because you notice that you tend to gravitate towards the familiar, right? And that's, I think that's just human nature. And they realized long before I went there that in the test environment, that is bad, because it stifles innovation and it stifles creative thought in how to accomplish a mission. And that we cannot, and that's something we cannot have. We cannot have in the US military, in my opinion.
That's a great perspective. And I think that, yeah, learning about, not stifling creativity and, just everything you just said, I think can be applied to so many different ways that we live and that we work. Here's another question, and this may be one of our last ones. So if there's anyone else with a last minute question, be sure and send it in, but we just got a couple minutes left. Travis Whedon asked, what goes through your mind as you prepare to step out on a spacewalk? Do you try to train your mind to focus on the task at hand?
Oh my gosh, yes. You're hyper focused. People always ask me what goes through your mind as soon as you open up the hatch. And the first thing that goes through my mind is time to go to work. It's time to go to work. And then the next thing I think about is, let's make sure the tethers are well and I take care of my partner.
That's so interesting, an experience obviously no one else on this call has had or will ever have.
Well, I hope you're wrong. I
Maybe
would
there will be
love,
some
I
of
would
this.
love to see more people fly in space. That's the one problem with space flight. Not enough people get to go. More people need to get to go.
Well, we did have a question about that. What do you think the future of space flight looks like?
I think that the future looks like a whole lot more people going. just a select few. And nobody is happier about that than me.
That's very cool. Very, very cool. Well, I just want to say thank you. I will, like I told you, I will show you all of the comments that have come in through the chat. We've had so many just talking about how inspirational you've been today. Thanking you for speaking and also for your service to our country. And I just wanted to share a few of those sentiments with you, but we appreciate you for being here and for sharing your story with us today and for sharing all of these incredible insights. I know that we all have a lot to think about as we go on and get back to our work this afternoon. So yeah, thanks again for joining us.
Thank
Well,
you.
thanks for inviting me. And Rocky, thanks for thinking of me, buddy. Appreciate it.
Couldn't think of anyone else, buddy.
Great. Well, everyone, I know everyone will start to sign off soon, but again, if you're seeking a CPE, please go ahead and, just say a quick thanks in the chat so that we know that you are still here at the end of the program. I also wanted to remind you all that we have another fantastic speaker coming up virtually on Thursday, May 20th. Richard Kite is going to speak about ethical decision-making under pressure. So we can look forward to that coming up. But again, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to Robert for sharing your really remarkable story with us. And we hope to see you all at another OK Ethics presentation soon.